King Nebuchadnezzar, the wicked king who fell like a beast, the fire that did not burn. I saw it with my own eyes. I still hear the crackling of the fire, still smell the smoke in my nostrils. It was real, too real. King Nebuchadnezzar was a man no one dared to challenge. His word was final. If he said you lived, you lived. If he said you died, you died. And that day he wanted 3 boys dead, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 stubborn fools. Some whispered, 3 brave men, others said. They refused to bow to the golden statue the king had made. The law was clear, bow or burn. But they stood there, heads high, their eyes fearless. I was there, watching from the crowd, my heart pounding. The king's face twisted with anger. His voice boomed across the courtyard. Heat the furnace 7 times hotter. The guards rushed to obey. The fire roared, turning from orange to white, then blue. The air around it wavered from the heat. The stones of the furnace cracked. Even standing far back, I could feel the heat licking at my skin. Then came the worst part. The guards, strong men in heavy armor, grabbed the 3 boys and dragged them forward. They didn't struggle. They didn't beg. They didn't even try to run. The king's command was death, and they walked into it like men walking into a house. The moment the guards got close, the heat struck them down. They screamed loud, terrible screams as their flesh melted before they even touched the fire. Their armor turned red hot and stuck to their bodies. They fell lifeless before they could push the boys in. The whole crowd gasped, but the king only snarled, "Throw them in." Other guards, trembling now, did as they were told. They bound Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with thick ropes and threw them into the raging fire. I turned away. I couldn't watch them burn. But then I heard whispers, then shouts, then silence. I turned back. Inside the furnace, 3 figures still stood. No, not 3, 4. A 4th man was in there with them, walking among the flames like it was nothing. His face was like lightning, his body like glowing bronze. The fire had no power over them. The ropes that had bound them were gone, burned away, but their clothes were untouched. Their hair was not singed, not even a single drop of sweat. The crowd was frozen in fear. Some fell to their knees. Others turned to flee. Even the mighty king Nebuchadnezzar took a step back, his face pale. Then his voice cracked. "Come out." Slowly, they stepped out of the fire. The 4th man was gone, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood there alive. The king trembled. His lips moved, but no words came at first. Then, in a voice unlike his usual prideful roar, he spoke, "No God can save like this." I still think about that day. I still hear the screams of the guards, see the fire that should have destroyed those men, but didn't. And I know this, what I saw was real, and it was terrifying. King Nebuchadnezzar was not just any king. He was a ruler who thought he was greater than all gods, greater than any man. His kingdom, Babylon, was the most powerful on earth. His word was law. He built statues of himself, demanded worship, and destroyed anyone who refused to bow before him. He was feared by all, and his pride had no limit. The wickedness of King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was cruel beyond measure. If you disobeyed him, you died. If you stood against him, your family was wiped out. He conquered nations, burning cities to the ground and taking people as slaves. He took the best and strongest from other lands and forced them to serve him. He didn't care about anyone but himself. When he built a giant golden statue and commanded that every person bow to it, he didn't expect resistance. But 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, stood firm. They refused to bow. The king was furious. No one had ever disobeyed him and lived to tell the tale. His pride was wounded. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter, hot enough to kill even the men who got close. His anger made him blind. He wanted those 3 men to suffer, to scream, to burn until nothing was left. But God had other plans. God's power to save. The moment Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fire, something happened that no one expected. Instead of being burned alive, they stood up inside the fire, completely unharmed. Their ropes burned away, but their clothes, their hair, their skin, nothing was touched by the flames. And they were not alone. A 4th man appeared in the fire with them. His face shone like the sun, and he walked with them as if the fire was nothing. The people watching trembled. Even Nebuchadnezzar himself was shaken. The same king who had demanded their death now called them out, his voice no longer filled with pride, but with fear. "Come out." And they did. Not a single burn, not even a smell of smoke on them. That day, Nebuchadnezzar saw something he could not deny. The power of God was greater than any king. But his lesson was not over. Nebuchadnezzar's fall, from king to beast. Even after witnessing this miracle, Nebuchadnezzar still thought of himself as the greatest ruler of all time. His heart was filled with pride. He looked over his kingdom and said, "Is this not the great Babylon that I have built by my own power?" But God had heard enough. A voice came from heaven. "Your kingdom is taken from you. You will live like an animal. You will eat grass like the ox. Until you learn that God is the true ruler of all, you will remain like this." That very moment, Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind. His crown fell. His royal clothes were torn. His eyes went wild, and he ran into the wilderness like a madman. For 7 years, he lived like an animal. His hair grew long like eagle feathers. His nails became like claws. He ate grass, crawling on all 4s, forgotten by his people. Rain poured over him, and the sun burned his skin. The mighty king had become nothing more than a beast. Thank you for joining our channel, MAT, Mayor African Folktales. Please, if this is your first time, subscribe and click notification for new videos. Thanks for watching. The kings returned to sanity. After 7 long years, Nebuchadnezzar finally lifted his eyes to heaven. His pride was broken. He knew now that no man, no king, no power on earth to compare to God. At that moment, his mind returned to him. His strength came back. His people found him, and he was restored as king. But he was no longer the same. He no longer claimed to be greater than God. He stood before his kingdom and declared, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and honor the King of heaven. His power is forever, and his kingdom will never end. No one can stand against him. He is the true ruler of all." The lesson of Nebuchadnezzar. This story is not just about a wicked king. It is about the power of God. He saved 3 men from fire without a single burn. He took the most powerful man on earth and turned him into a beast. He restored that same man when he finally acknowledged the truth. No king, no nation, no human power can stand against the Most High. Nebuchadnezzar learned this the hard way, and the world never forgot.